Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our 21st Annual Quality Assurance in Higher Education Week. This morning, our program will be headed by Dr. Vivian Quarry, Associate Professor at the Northern Caribbean University in the Department of Graduate Education and Leadership. She will begin speaking directly after the playing of the national anthem.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another of our hosting of the University Council of Jamaica of Quality Assurance Week 2026. This is our 21st annual edition, and I use this opportunity to thank you all for joining us. At this time, I wish to identify those who are here, and I now invite all of us to make welcome Dr. Tamika Benjamin from the Ministry of Education, Jamaica. Then we have the chairman of our Board of Governors, who is with us this morning, and who will speak to us regarding this important event. Additionally, we have some important speakers. Among these speakers are Dr. Winston Thompson, President of the Jamaica Theological Seminary, Professor Tristan McCowan, Professor of International Education, University College London Institute of Education, Ms. Heidi Green, Assessment Specialist, Cambridge University Press and Assessment, Ms. Megan Rees, Assessment Specialist, Cambridge University Press and Assessment, Dr. Lisa Henlin, Director of Accreditation, the University Council of Jamaica, Dr. Marcia Pabaru, an Accreditation Officer at the University Council of Jamaica, the members of the University Council of Jamaica team, representatives of the Ministry of Education, Skills, Youth and Information, leaders and representatives of higher education institutions across all of Jamaica, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the chairman of the Board of Governors, Dr. Andrea White Walters, and all the members of the team of the board there at the University Council, as well as those who work there, I use this opportunity to welcome you. This is indeed an important event because when higher education faces crises, the University Council of Jamaica guards standards. This is important in the world in which we live because standards may be negatively impacted or positively impacted based on our environment. We have had numerous challenges across the past 5 years as we have worked in higher education. But because of the resilience of those who work in higher education institutions, as well as the resilience of the University Council of Jamaica and those who give oversight to quality and standards in higher education, we have survived. Today, we are operating under a very special theme, from shock to stability, sustaining higher education quality through crisis and beyond. I am pleased to welcome you all to this event and pray that as we listen to our presenters, we will be able to glean meaningful and important information that will continue to guide us from now until the end of time. I now invite Dr. Winston Thompson, President of the Jamaica Theological Seminary, to offer prayers.
Let us pray. Dear God, as we celebrate our 21st annual Quality Assurance in Higher Education Week, we thank you for the privilege to be co-laborers with you in shaping lives and creating opportunities for professional development. We acknowledge our insufficiencies and ask for your assistance in the service you have called us to perform. We recognize that we are unable to reach our goals without your help. So we call on your Spirit today to uplift us, support us, and inspire us. Uplift us so that we can stand in the positions in which you have placed us. Support us so that we will prevail in moments of weakness, and inspire us so that we will be renewed daily to meet the challenges of each day. Lord, as we gather today for this time of reflection, may the information to which we are exposed stimulate our imagination so that we do more today than we did yesterday. May we experience renewed strength so that we will achieve the goals you have placed before us. May all that we do during these sessions that shape our celebrations this year be done to honor you and uplift those that we serve. These are indeed the requests that we make of you today. In the name of Jesus, your Son and our Lord, we now say, Amen.
And now that we have been presented before the throne of grace, I invite our illustrious chairman of the University Council of Jamaica, Mrs. Andrea White Walters, to bring opening remarks.
Good morning, distinguished guests, colleagues, in higher education, and students. Welcome to the University Council of Jamaica's 21st Annual Quality Assurance in Higher Education Week. Higher education systems across the world are facing a defining question. How do we protect learning when disruption becomes the norm rather than the exception? It is therefore fitting, colleagues, that we gather today, this morning, for the University Council of Jamaica's 21st Quality Assurance in Higher Education Week under the theme, From Shock to Stability, Sustaining Higher Education Quality Through Crisis and Beyond. Over the past several years, higher education has experienced a series of disruptions that tested long-standing assumptions about how institutions operate. A global pandemic, rapid digital transformation such as AI, economic pressures, geopolitical uncertainties, and climate-related events have required institutions to adapt quickly while continuing to safeguard academic standards and student success, which is the core of what we do at UCJ. Jamaica has experienced these pressures as well. Our institutions have navigated severe weather events, operational disruption, and accelerated shifts in delivery modes. Jamaica's recent experience with Hurricane Melissa reminded us how quickly disruption can affect educational endurance. Colleagues, in moments such as these, higher education does not simply pause. Institutions work to maintain teaching and learning. Faculty adapts. Students continue striving towards their goals. Yet the effects of disruptions are real. Some students may experience delays in their studies, others may formally defer their programs, and others may step away completely from higher education. Survival alone, however, is not the measure of success. The challenge, therefore, before us is to ensure that systems are strong enough to protect learning during periods of disruption. For many years, quality assurance in higher education focused primarily on compliance. Institutions were assessed through accreditation cycles, curriculum standards, faculty qualifications, and infrastructure benchmarks. These elements remain essential, but today, quality assurance must do more. Quality assurance must support continuity of learning. It must enable institutions to adapt responsibly to new delivery models. It must ensure that innovation strengthens standards rather than weakens them. And I will share, colleagues, that global evidence reinforces the shift. UNESCO's report, Reimagining Our Futures Together, a new social contract education 2021, reminds us that resilient education systems are built on strong public governance, inclusion, and sustained commitment to quality. Similarly, the World Bank's report, Realizing the Future of Learning, from Learning Poverty to Learning for Everyone, Everywhere, 2018, highlights that systems with strong governance and quality assurance frameworks better positioned to sustain learning through periods of disruptions. For Jamaica, these lessons point to the importance of building and sustaining a relentless culture of quality. Quality within an institution, however, is first and foremost the responsibility of that institution. Culture of quality goes beyond accreditation cycles or compliance reports. It means that standards are internalized, that continuous improvement becomes embedded in institutional practice and procedures, and that resilience is designed into systems before disruption occurs. Through accreditation, standards development, and public education, the University Council of Jamaica works with institutions to safeguard academic integrity and protect public trust in Jamaican qualifications. But the responsibility does not rest with the Council alone. Culture of quality requires leadership within institutions. It requires engagement from faculty and staff. It requires critically the voices of our students, and it requires a shared commitment across the sector to accountability and continuous improvement. Quality Assurance in Higher Education Week provides an opportunity, an important national platform for this collaboration. Through our online forum, youth forum, award ceremony, and quality clinic, we engage in dialogue with our stakeholders through resilience, governance, and the future of higher education in Jamaica. Because, colleagues, stability does not mean the absence of disruption. Stability means the presence of strong systems, clear standards, and responsible leadership. As we look ahead, The question is no longer whether disruption will occur again. The question is whether our institutions and our quality systems are prepared to protect learning when it does. Disruption may be inevitable. Decline is not. With strong governance, with a culture of quality, and with a shared commitment to excellence, Jamaica's higher education sector will not simply withstand disruption. We will adapt and we will emerge stronger. On behalf of the University Council of Jamaica, I thank you for your partnership and your continued leadership in advancing quality education across our beautiful island. Let us move forward together from shock to stability and from stability to sustained excellence. Thank you all.
And now that we have heard from the chairman of the University Council of Jamaica, Mrs. Andrea White Walters, who has clearly articulated the position of this University Council as well as its board, we now move to our opening address by Dr. Tamika Benjamin, Assistant Chief Education Officer in the Ministry of Education, Skills, Youth and Information, who is also a member of the board of the University Council of Jamaica. Dr. Tamika Benjamin.
Thank you, Dr. Corey, and good morning, everyone. On behalf of the Ministry of Education, Skills, Youth and Information, it is my pleasure to extend warm greetings to the University Council of Jamaica, leaders of our tertiary institutions, faculty members, students, quality assurance professionals, and all participants gathered for the opening of Quality Assurance in Higher Education Week 2026. Over the past several decades, Jamaica has experienced steady growth in the number of tertiary institutions, programs, and modes of delivery. This expansion reflects a deliberate national commitment to widening access to higher education and training, ensuring that more Jamaicans have opportunities to pursue advanced learning and contribute meaningfully to the country's economic and social development. However, expanding access must always be accompanied by a strong and unwavering commitment to quality. The value of higher education lies not simply in the number of individuals who graduate, but in the quality, relevance, and integrity of the programs through which these qualifications are earned. A credible and well-regulated higher education system protects students, strengthens public confidence, and ensures that Jamaican qualifications maintain their value and recognition both locally and internationally. Recent global disruptions have further underscored the importance of strong quality assurance systems. During periods of crisis, institutions were required to pivot rapidly in the delivery of teaching and learning, adjust assessment approaches, and adopt new technologies to ensure continuity for students. These experiences demonstrated that resilience in higher education depends on strong governance structures, clear regulatory frameworks, and effective internal quality assurance mechanisms that safeguard academic standards in times of disruption. As higher education evolves, quality assurance systems around the world are increasingly focused on several critical priorities. These include ensuring that programs are guided by clearly defined learning outcomes, strengthening the quality of teaching and learning, maintaining integrity in assessment, and ensuring that programs remain relevant to labor market and national development needs. There is also growing emphasis on the quality of digital and blended learning environments, the international comparability of qualifications, and the stronger systems of accountability and transparency. In this context, the work of the University Council of Jamaica remains central to safeguarding the integrity of Jamaica's higher education system. Through its regulatory and quality assurance functions, the Council plays a critical role in ensuring that institutions maintain the standards required for national confidence and international recognition. Quality Assurance in Higher Education Week therefore provides an important opportunity for institutional leaders, faculty, policymakers, students, and regulators to reflect collectively on how we continue to strengthen the systems that support academic excellence across Jamaica's tertiary sector. The theme for this year's observance, From Shock to Stability, Sustaining Higher Education Quality Through Crisis and Beyond, speaks directly to the experiences of recent years. It reminds us that while crises may test our systems, they also provide opportunities to strengthen them. Moving from shock to stability requires institutions not only to recover from disruption, but also to build more resilient systems capable of sustaining quality under changing circumstances. At the same time, higher education must continue to respond to a rapidly evolving global environment. Technological change, digital transformation, and shifting economic priorities are redefining the knowledge and skills required in the workforce. Institutions must therefore continuously review and strengthen their programs to ensure that graduates are equipped with the competencies, adaptability, and critical thinking skills necessary to thrive in a dynamic world. The Ministry of Education, Skills, Youth, and Information continues to work closely with the University Council of Jamaica and our tertiary institutions to strengthen governance, enhance accountability, and support initiatives aimed at improving coordination across Jamaica's higher education ecosystem. These efforts reflect a broader national commitment to ensuring that as access to higher education expands, the systems that safeguard quality, relevance, and public confidence are strengthened in equal measure. The Ministry therefore commends the University Council of Jamaica for its leadership in convening this national forum and for its continued commitment to strengthening quality assurance within Jamaica's higher education sector. As we participate in the discussions and activities planned for this week, the Ministry calls upon all institutional leaders, faculty members, quality assurance practitioners, regulators, and students to continue working collaboratively to build a higher education system that is resilient in the face of disruption, responsive to the evolving needs of the workforce, innovative in teaching and learning, accessible to those seeking opportunity through education, and credible and respected both locally and internationally. Quality assurance is a shared responsibility. It requires the collective commitment of leaders who shape institutional direction, faculty who design and deliver programs, quality assurance professionals who safeguard standards, and students who actively engage in the learning process. Through strong partnerships and an unwavering commitment to excellence, we can ensure that Jamaica's higher education system continues to support national development and empower future generations. The Ministry of Education, Skills, Youth, and Information wishes you a productive and enriching Quality Assurance in Higher Education Week 2026. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tamika Benjamin, for your continued support of the University Council of Jamaica and for reinforcing the undying support of the Ministry of Education, Skills, Youth, and Information in Jamaica. And now, I invite Dr. Marsha Pabaru, an accreditation officer at the University Council of Jamaica, to introduce our keynote speaker.
Good morning, everyone. Tristan McCowan is a professor of international education at the Institute of Education, University College London. His work focuses on higher education in the international context, including issues of access, curriculum, alternative models, and sustainability. His books include Higher Education for and Beyond the Sustainable Development Goals, Education as a Human Right, and Rethinking Citizenship Education. From 2015 to 2021, he was editor of Compare, a journal of international and comparative education. He was the founder of Climate U Network, bringing together 27 universities and environmental organizations in 14 countries, engaging in climate-related participatory action research. His latest book, Universities and Climate Action, was published in 2025. Welcome, Professor McCowan.
Thank you very much for that kind welcome, and it's wonderful to be with you all here today. Great to hear those opening remarks, very thought-provoking. And I think everybody is online today. It's always a bit galling when you're the only online person and everyone else is having a nice time together. So, but it is great that even though I couldn't be learning about Jamaica in the country, that I've got the opportunity to engage with you all through this important event and learn a little bit about the debates in the country relating to quality assurance, and also importantly around this theme, crucial theme that the event this time is focusing on. There's a lot going on in the world. We're in the midst of a terrifying conflict. We've also have the backdrop of a pandemic a few years ago, Hurricane Melissa in Jamaica and the Caribbean region, which I'm sure is topmost of everyone's minds. And those are only the immediate crises facing us. There are also the longer term ecological crises, biodiversity, climate change, not to mention poverty, ongoing poverty and exclusion, which some people have called a polycrisis, the existence of all of these challenges simultaneously. Today, I'm going to look specifically at environmental sustainability, but in the spirit of the interconnections between sustainability in that sense and the other aspects of the polycrisis, because the environmental crisis is a human crisis. It's about the way we organize our societies, the way we think, the way we are, the way we relate to the world. So these things are closely connected. As I said, I found the opening address raised some really important, very thought-provoking issues in thinking about how institutions and systems can be resilient in times of crisis. And Dr. Benjamin's comment that these shocks sometimes can give us opportunities to strengthen, I think, is a very important point. And I will look at sustainability very much in that spirit today, that these very worrying predicaments that we find ourselves in actually do give us an opportunity to bring change that we needed to bring anyway. Universities have done extraordinarily well in surviving for almost a millennium and longer if we take some of the earlier forms of higher learning around the world. But they need to transform themselves yet again for a new age. And thinking about the polycrisis can allow us to bring those kinds of changes. When we're thinking of the interaction between universities and sustainable development or the climate crisis, we can think of the different directions of influence. So on the one hand, we've got the negative impacts that extreme weather and other events can have on universities. On the other hand, there's the positive influence that higher education can have in mitigation, adaptation, regeneration, in all the things that we need to do to ensure our continuing survival and thriving. It's the latter that I'll focus on mainly today, not because it's the only important question. We need to think about both together. But in my own work, I focus more on the educational responses to these crises, the ways that we can positively impact on our societies, but not only through education. And I also want to broaden our perspective on the way we think about higher education's impact in tying together the different functions of the institution to try and think more holistically about that. And needless to say, these are ideas that need to be grounded in specific context. So I look forward to hearing your comments and questions and reactions afterwards. As was put in the chat, please do put any questions you have in the Q&A function in the course of the talk. So I'll take you through a few reflections on some ideas around sustainability and how it might relate to higher education, and the different ways in which we might conceptualize the relationship between higher education and sustainability. So at the center of our current understandings of sustainability are the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, which in 2015 rather, were enshrined as the central component of the global development agenda. And the SDGs brought some considerable differences from earlier frameworks, most particularly the Millennium Development Goals, the MDGs, into introducing a much stronger environmental dimension, into bringing all countries into view, not only the so-called developing countries or the lowest income countries, and also in introducing notions of equity and equality as important dimensions. And the SDGs have been strongly taken up by the higher education community. I'll be interested to hear from colleagues with us today about how they have manifested themselves in Jamaica. But internationally, there have been three main ways in which universities have engaged with the SDGs. The first is in mapping current activities, using the 17 goals to categorize different activities that the universities are carrying out. My institution, for example, has University College London, has mapped its Scopus publications according to the 17 goals. There are different ways in which this mapping can take place. The second is more of a more proactive aligning of activities. So that's looking to how we can shape future activities to more effectively address the 17 goals. And the last, which is closely connected to the previous two, is in terms of evaluation. And I'll say a little bit more later about how some of the ranking schemes have tried to adapt their activities to more effectively address sustainability. Nevertheless, even though we do have these different kinds of engagement, I would argue that there's been quite a narrow understanding of how universities can interact with sustainability, and that we need to think across all three of these dimensions: the projective, the expressive, and the constructive. And I'll say a little bit about what I mean by each of these three. So the projective is the way that we conventionally view universities and, in fact, all education institutions. And that's that higher education positively impacts society outside of itself, both in space and in time, so that universities have a positive impact on the world outside, but also on the world after the education of the students, so that undergraduate will come, spend 3-4 more years in the university, will then go out into the world of work and will take that positive influence out. So that's the conventional way that we think about social goals in education, is through the projective mode. But I'll argue that we need to think about two other modes as well. the expressive, and this is how we incorporate those values into the everyday working of institutions. Universities are themselves communities. In some cases, they're very large communities. Some Latin American universities, I work very commonly in Brazil, other parts of Latin America. Some of the Latin American public universities have 400,000 students. So these are large cities. Other universities might be more like towns or villages, but they are important communities in their own right. They have, in some cases, quite significant environmental impacts. So we need to think about that dimension as well. And the final one is constructive, and that's how we build ideas that shape society. So I'll say a little bit about each of these three before concluding. You don't need me to tell you about the causes or impacts of climate change, which is not the only crisis facing humanity at the moment, but it's certainly the most intractable, most difficult to solve. And the buildup of greenhouse gases is causing significant impacts already, and many more built up for the future. And as a result of this, we developed the Climate U project that, as was mentioned in the initial comments, afterwards developed into a network. And we conceptualized the project very much in terms of this projective mode. What positive impact can universities have in trying to address climate change? So we developed this model. I won't be able to go through it in detail. If anyone's interested, I'd be very happy to share an explanation of it in writing afterwards, which we have published. But you can see here that we saw this in terms of the impact that the university and its different functions can have on society via bridging actors, which are the communities and individuals that come into direct contact with universities. Most importantly, the graduates who go out into the world of work, act as citizens and in their personal lives, but also organizations, communities, governments, and so forth. And then a knock-on impact on society and the ecosphere itself and on climate change. And there are various ways in which this can happen. So it could take place, in fact, most commonly, most obviously, it takes place through the educational function of universities, through teaching and learning, through the curriculum. And in this, we did a large-scale survey of undergraduate students. It was in 4 countries, in fact, in Brazil, Kenya, Mozambique, and Fiji. Sadly, we didn't have a Caribbean member. Hopefully we can remedy that at some point. But we did have a large number of students participating, around 6,000. And there were very clear findings coming out that students want to learn more about climate change in their universities. They do have fairly robust knowledge of climate change, but it comes from the primary sources of learning were in fact from the internet and social media, and that universities were way down in 3rd place as a source of learning. So they were learning something about climate change in their courses, but the vast majority wanted to learn a lot more. So there's a strong pressure and an important steer from students there to encourage universities to do more in that regard. But education isn't the only function. And many of our partners were carrying out work directly with communities as well, particularly through students. So on the top left, you can see our partner in Kenyatta University in Kenya opened up a space for students to develop their own initiatives. This was very innovative, and students made very interesting connections between climate and local languages, issues of biodiversity, but also some student concerns around mental health and using innovative methods such as arts and so forth. And you can see on the right-hand side our partners in Fiji engaging with local communities to develop coastal defences around encroachment of saltwater and agricultural land and extreme weather, particularly through engaging with elders of communities, trying to incorporate Indigenous knowledge and working with schools as well to build a new knowledge base for schools, working together with universities. And here are colleagues in Tanzania who also working with communities in promoting community-led innovative ways of protecting coral reefs, regenerating coral and mangroves, bringing together concerns around local livelihoods, these are fishing communities, as well as broader environmental concerns. So those are some of the ways in which universities can project their influence out in the world. But as I mentioned before, we also need to think about what's happening in our own house. It's not only about creating a better world outside universities, but also making sure that we're practicing what we preach. It won't come as any surprise to say that universities are not always consistent in that. In fact, there have been a lot of criticisms and concerns around greenwashing of universities, talking the talk about sustainability, but not walking the walk. So we need to think about internal transformation as well. My own institution, UCL, has been making some efforts in this regard through our Sustainable UCL initiative with different kinds of being an urban university, we're not managing natural areas, but trying to regenerate and to reduce our waste by as much as possible. But all this is happening in a very difficult environment in terms of the kinds of values that lead higher education in the international sphere. For fear of launching us into a big debate about university rankings, which is a topic I know we always like to debate, it is important to point out that the general rankings for universities, so the big high visibility international rankings of Times Higher, Shanghai, and QS, none of them pay close attention to either sustainability specifically, or even to community engagement more broadly. If we look here at the methodology used by these big rankings, you can see that in the community engagement column, there's just a paltry 2.5% in the Times Higher, and that's just for industry income, let alone the broader kinds of interactions that universities can have with communities. And even the teaching column is very inadequate. So they're very much rankings based on elite research without much attention to the other kinds of impacts that universities can and should be having on the natural environment and social issues. However, there have been some other developments in terms of rankings. So two of those big three, Times Higher and QS, have developed their own sustainability-related rankings. Times Higher, the impact one, which is based on the SDGs specifically, QS more broadly on sustainability. And then there are also some, there's also Green Metric, which is a very popular gauge that's actually was developed in Indonesia. There are then some national systems of evaluation, STARS in North America and People and Planet in the UK, which have been used. What do they throw out? Well, you can see here, I'm just taking one of them, the Times Higher ranking. There are some different names on the list. You know, none of these 10 are right at the top of the general rankings. Nevertheless, they are all based with possible exception of the Malaysian institutions. They are all based in the wealthiest countries in the world with very good conditions for university operations. And I think this is a key point here in that I don't want to be too cynical. I do think that it is a positive development that the big ranking agencies are starting to think about sustainability and sustainable development and the SDGs and so forth. Nevertheless, the way that they're using their evaluations still do privilege well-resourced institutions, usually in high-income countries, because it takes a tremendous amount of administrative capacity to actually bring together all the evidence needed to curate it into a narrative that's going to allow the institution to be positively evaluated. So I think it's a step in the right direction, but a huge leap is still needed. I won't go through these in detail, but you can see that the methodologies involved in these different ranking systems privilege different aspects of sustainability. Some more on the physical infrastructure, estates, and so forth. Others looking at more on human resources, educational sides, and so forth. So I think, in summary, rankings can help us to change institutional policy and practice. But they don't always put the rewards in the right place. They still suffer from all of the problems of the general rankings. And we do need to think much more deeply about what kinds of incentives we provide for institutions. You don't need me to tell you, being quality assurance people, that the right kinds of quality assurance systems are absolutely fundamental in this process at the national level. So the final one of the triad here is the constructive. And I'd argue here that most attention, when we think about sustainability in higher education, has gone to the first two of these, the projective and the expressive, particularly to the projective, and little attention to the final one, constructive. But I'd argue that actually universities are best equipped of all institutions to provide this constructive dimension. And I mean by that here, the ability to forge new ideas, the absolutely vital role of universities, both in creating and generating new research and scholarship and evidence and ideas and thinking, imagination, and so forth, but also acting as an arena for debate, encouraging debate in society, and participating through media, social media, and other spheres outside the university in invigorating that debate. And sustainability is not a settled concept. It does appear to be a win-win if we look historically at efforts from the Second World War to increase social justice, global social justice, ideas of international development, reduction of poverty worldwide. And then on the other side, we've got the growing environmental movement, conservation through the 1960s and 70s, the emergence of different environmental NGOs and UN agencies and so forth. These spheres are very much separate. They start to come together through the Brundtland Report and the Earth Summit in the 80s and 90s. And it's only really with the SDGs that the notion of sustainable development brings these two together in a common framework, which is at the center of our global development agendas. It appears a perfect win-win. We look after human beings and we protect the environment at the same time. We promote the planet and we promote its human inhabitants along with the other beings. However, there are cracks in this happy story. Just to give one example, if you look at Sustainable Development Goal 8, the goal starts to sustain per capita economic growth. Now, for many environmentalists, in fact, for large portions of the citizenry in our countries, economic growth is incompatible with protection of the environment, or at least the kind of economic growth which we've become used to, the rampant exploitation of both the natural environment and its human communities, the pollution and waste, the accumulation of wealth in a small proportion of the population are completely incompatible with the kinds of equitable, sustainable development that we need. So it's just to give an example of the kind of contestation, and I'm sure you'll all have your own positions on this, but I really just want to highlight that sustainable development is not a settled concept. It's one about which we need to have vigorous debate. Needless to say, there are many critiques of the idea of sustainability. One, for example, that the idea of sustaining is all very well for the haves, but not for the have-nots. The have-nots want transformation. They want change. They don't want sustainability. They want something completely different. There are critiques of the colonial nature of forms of sustainability, arguments for indigenous knowledge, and so forth. So there are a variety of critical voices here. My own views on this were changed by a fascinating visit to the Intercultural University of Veracruz, not so far away from where you are, on the Caribbean coast of Mexico. And speaking with undergraduate students there in around the SDGs, they pointed out some important points about the SDG framework. Very little attention to culture, very little attention to community. So we've got a framework which really doesn't address some of the things that are most important in people's lives. Also, many people have pointed out also the lack of religious engagement with faith and spirituality and so forth. Not to mention different forms of knowledge, indigenous knowledge I've also mentioned as well. So we can invigorate the SDGs and sustainability through thinking about different knowledge systems. One of those in South America is Sumac Causai, or Buen Vivir in Spanish, good living, an alternative philosophy of life for living in harmony with the natural environment and each other. Many Latin American countries are drawing on this framework, in order to nourish their imagination and working in their university sectors. So I'll sum up now with a few final reflections. I've argued that we need to think about sustainability very seriously in universities. We need to prioritize this as an agenda in all of our actions, including quality assurance, but that we need to think of it more broadly than we usually do, not only in its projections to society, but also in the expressive and the constructive modes as well, in practicing what we preach, transforming our own campuses, communities, but also engaging in a rethinking of the very concept of sustainable development. And this existence of the university as a forge of ideas is its enduring function. We don't always need to think at scale. Small-scale initiatives are inevitably going to be important in universities. Universities are inevitably going to be unruly institutions. They have academic freedom. They have a good deal of autonomy from their states. And in fact, the bottom-up movements, the grassroots movements, student-led, staff-led initiatives are extremely important. We need to encourage the actions of those who believe in sustainability and use their creativity rather than trying to standardize initiatives across whole sectors. Having said that, leadership is, of course, important. We need to use leadership to incentivize, to nourish, and to allow the creativity of students and staff to come through. We also need to rethink the nature of our institutions, and this comes back to the piece around avoiding greenwashing, and also to be confident in the role of universities. There has been a tendency over recent decades for universities to play catch up with society, look at the latest trends and to think how we can adapt ourselves. And inevitably, there will be a degree of that. But we also need to think of the university sector as protagonist, as a leader in these things. And in the field of sustainability, this is particularly relevant. Before opening it out for questions, I'll just end with an invitation for those people interested in this topic. Please to get in touch with me personally. I'm very happy to hear from you if you're interested in engaging on these ideas. And also, if you're interested to join the Climate U network, as was mentioned before, we have members in many countries. You can see a few of them here. What we try and encourage is holistic thinking about university transformation for sustainability and climate action. So if you're interested in exchanging knowledge with institutions in many countries in the world, particularly using participatory action research, you'd be very welcome to join the Climate U network. So I will finish my comments there. I think I've stopped sharing there. So I'll turn over to you to hear your reactions. And particularly in relation, as I said, to I'll be interested to hear how the participants here have react from a quality assurance perspective. I was actually on a meeting earlier today, and UNESCO is trying to promote very heavily the incorporation of sustainability principles into quality assurance. So I'll be interested to hear how that's manifesting in Jamaica. In the UK, the QAA has in 2021 developed guidelines for curricula. So there have been some developments in different countries. So I'll be interested to hear from you on that. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Professor Tristan McCowan of the University College of London, for your engaging presentation. It is now my delight to introduce you to Mr. Najay Murray, the Director of Public Relations and Communication at the University Council of Jamaica, and who is the 2024-2025 recipient of the prestigious Chevening J. N. Oliver F. Clark Scholarship, who pursued a Master's in Education and International Development at the University College London. He will be doing the moderation of this program, and he will continue with the rest of the events. At this time, I invite Mr. Murray to relate to this question and answer session, because I'm sure that there are individuals who would be willing and ready to participate. Over to you, Mr. Murray.
Thank you so much, Dr. Corey, and thank you again, Professor McCowan, for your enlightening and enriching presentation. One of the first things that really jumps out at me after listening to your presentation, or what I would like to truly get a wide understanding of, is what are the recommendations that institutions can adopt to build a climate resilient higher education institution, and how do we manage that along with public trust of the institution?
Thanks. So yeah, I mean, I think we need to think simultaneously in different time frames. I think that one of the real challenges for universities, in fact, addressing climate change generally, is that it is both an immediate problem and it's a very long-term problem. We're also working at different spatial levels. It's an immediate problem in terms of the campus, but universities are also educating people who will go out into the world and in different parts of the country and globally. So there are all of those interlocking levels. I think there is a lot that universities can do to reduce their carbon footprint. If we go through the three, if we're thinking of climate action, the three main areas of mitigation, adaptation, and regeneration, there are many things that universities can do to reduce their carbon footprint, quite often divided into scope 1 2 and 3. So firstly, the direct emissions, fuel usage and so forth. Scope 2, the sources of electricity, and then Scope 3, the upstream and downstream impacts, so from procurement and so forth. So there are many things that universities can do to reduce their carbon footprint. Obviously, there are cost implications. Fortunately, not all of them are negative. So some carbon reductions actually save universities money. And as we all know, all of our institutions, including the one where I'm sitting at the moment, we could be a lot more efficient in terms of our energy usage on campus. You walk around, there are always lights left on, there are always computers left on. So there's a lot more that all of us can do about the very simple things. And that will actually save institutions money. So we really have to go for the win-wins there of actually reducing energy usage and our own bills. Unfortunately, there are other environmentally friendly measures that sadly do bring an upfront cost. And that's what makes some of this work so difficult to put in place, because universities, generally speaking, do not have spare cash lying around. It's very hard to make upfront investments. It's hard to justify to our university communities and so forth why resources are being diverted to one area and not another. We have so many pressing priorities, and that's what makes this area of work, addressing these challenges as a global community so difficult. And that's why we need to work in collaboration and together with governments. And it's great to have representatives of the ministry here today, because universities really need the support of the whole higher education sector and ministries in order to avoid some of the competition between institutions that can act against this kind of work, and to create a conducive environment where we can make those environmental decisions.
Thank you so much. Another thing is that quality assurance in higher education is a collaborative effort between the external quality assurance agencies like the UCJ, and higher education institutions, and for them to foster academic quality and promote continuous improvement. So in what way, I know Sustainable Development Goal 4 speaks to quality education or providing quality education, but how then, if we're lacking funding in institutions, how then can we assure quality still while maintaining climate resilience, while maintaining partnership with community and community development and national development? How do we strike a balance between those activities?
Absolutely. So I think the key thing here is that building sustainable development into education systems is not replacing something else. So there are worries about overload in the curriculum, and I think very real worries. Sometimes lecturers in universities, they worry that they don't have the expertise, particularly if we're thinking about transdisciplinary work. So we can think about incorporation of sustainability, in specific disciplines, hopefully across all disciplines, but also in ways that go beyond disciplines. And this can be quite uncomfortable for lecturers who, most of us have been brought up in, fairly conventional disciplinary confines, and to move out of that comfort zone can be difficult. So I think for those reasons, it can at first sight appear like there might be some kind of trade-off between bringing in some of this new content and displacing other educationally important things that we might value when we're thinking more broadly about quality assurance and promoting SDG 4 and quality education. But I think that's a misconception, because sustainability in this sense is not an extra bit of content that we're putting in and is displacing something else. It's a different way of viewing what we're doing already. It's a way of understanding the education of young people and all of the people who come through universities in a way that we promote awareness of and responsibility for the human communities of which people are going to be part and the natural environment in which they're inserted. So it's a different viewpoint. It's trying to think about that knowledge in terms of the impact that it will have on all of us and on the natural environment. So I think if we think about it in that way, it doesn't have to be a trade-off.
Thank you so much. We have two questions here in the chat. I want to also encourage our other participants as well to please do put their questions and reflections in the chat. And if we don't get to answer them right now, we will also be able to answer them in the chat as we go on through the proceedings. But here we have from Charlie and Maury, the Sustainable Development Goals are still broad and macro level related related in most sectors. And so, in some cases, they are ambiguous and vaguely represented at the institutional level. Recommendations on how to operationalize sustainability goals so they become measurable at the institutional level for quality assurance. Not many are easily broken down as the climate goals. And this goes back to I think in my understanding, this goes back to the whole argument about policy being interpreted, not necessarily implemented. And that may be the disconnect there. But what are your thoughts, Professor?
I think this is a really good point. It's absolutely true. I mean, measurement, the development of clear criteria and benchmarks, it is very challenging. And of course, if we're looking across the SDGs, we've got 17 goals. All of them are huge. They're quite distinct, and the issues in each are going to be specific. But I would say, I mean, in work that I've done on thinking about how we measure universities' impact on climate, I think we have to think about three categories of what we do. So in the first basket, we've got those things that can be readily measured. So when there are many environmental impacts of institutions or forms of resilience that we can quite easily measure, even quantitatively. So I mentioned the scope 1, 2, and 3 carbon emissions, for example. So and those things we need to make sure that we are measuring and we can keep tabs on and so forth. Some countries are already doing. In the second basket, there are those things which we can research, we can identify, we can document and so forth, but we have to be a bit more creative in the ways that we do that. We might be using qualitative gauges, narratives and so forth. We might need to think about different ways of doing that. So we might move towards what some people have called a dashboard approach, so that we can keep some of these different things in view without necessarily collapsing them all onto a single indicator. But unfortunately, there are also some things which we're simply not going to be able to measure adequately. Take, for example, the public engagement of university. I'm sure the staff and students in your institutions will sometimes act as promoters or activists and try and encourage people in their communities, families. It's so multifaceted and those interactions are so numerous and diverse and sporadic. It's impossible to gauge all of them. So but nevertheless, there are incredibly important impacts of what universities do, radiating out that influence through all of the people whose lives are touched by contact with the institution. So there are some things that we know are happening, and unfortunately, we can never provide concrete, measurable gauges of, but we need to keep them in view anyway. So I think we need to hold in view these three kinds of impact, measure the things that we can measure, but don't dismiss those things that are not easily to measure.
All right, we have 3 more questions to go, and then we'll move on to the next presentation. But next question we have here from Amorly, please forgive me if I'm not pronouncing the name correctly, Lamont, is the expressive response limited because of the tendency to view climate change as a science-based issue? What is the research showing about reattitudes? What strategies can be used to get all disciplines, especially the arts and creative areas, involved in universities concerning climate change? My undergraduate degree was in marketing, something that is done in the arts, but a part of that degree focused on social and behavior change, right? So I think in some aspects, many of the degrees that we may find in the arts may show us how to communicate these types of attitudes, right? And how to help people process them as well. But I'd love to hear more of your thoughts.
Really important point, this, and I think that's absolutely true, that there is I mean, if you look at where climate change is integrated most fully, it is in the usual suspects. It's, where you'd imagine it to be: geography, environmental sciences, and so forth. There are some exceptions to that. But also there's a good degree of skepticism as to whether it's possible or practical to incorporate discussions of climate and sustainability across all areas. But it really is. I mean, and there's some great practice in literature courses, history. There are very important historical perspectives on the development of industrialization, the use of fossil fuels, and so forth that can open our insights. And these areas can also provide important approaches to teaching and learning that can also be useful in the natural sciences. So the interaction between the disciplinary areas can also be really important. There's an absolute consensus amongst environmental researchers that on one thing, that information is essential, but it's not enough. So we need information about climate, but just having the right information won't change our behavior. So we need to think about different ways of touching the things that matter to us. Stories, art, ways of relating to our personal lives. As you mentioned, different approaches to behavioral change and so forth. So we need to be a lot more creative in the way that we're approaching teaching and learning, as well as incorporating across all the different disciplines.
I agree. But then we have the argument about artificial intelligence. And one of the questions we have here from Barry Thompson, he's asking, how can institutions ensure quality is maintained through the teaching and learning process with the advent of artificial intelligence? But would that be considered a crisis, or would that be considered a new innovation that is taking root?
So I think the AI question is probably goes beyond the time we've got now and the topic. If we open that can of worms, we maybe never get the lid back on again. But I think just a few things about AI. I mean, AI, like all technological advancements over decades and centuries, it's a tool that can be applied to different ends. It's a tool that can be used for good and evil. It can be used for environmental protection, sustainability. It can be used against it. So it's really about how we employ it. There are lots of concerns about the way AI is being controlled, the way it's producing the answers it's producing. So a lot of thinking and care is needed. Obviously, in universities, there are huge debates around AI and assessment and the impact that it's having on students. Some people are more positive, some people are more negative. But we mustn't forget also there's another side of AI, which is the direct material impacts of it. Because for all the machinery that's needed, there are significant environmental impacts in terms of energy usage, water, not to mention the extraction of critical minerals for creating these machines. So I think we need to bear in mind the epistemic dimension, which is at the forefront, but also there's a material dimension to this as well that we mustn't forget.
Right, and thank you so much. Our final question, and again, if your question is unanswered, no, Professor will be able to respond to the chat during the presentation. But finally, we're going to look at this question here from Brian Wallace. Is it difficult to maintain resilience with financial stability? The challenge is that small institutions face the challenge of maintaining financial sustainability. Matters relating to climate change are mainly addressed when they happen, or they may just, in my opinion, may just appear in a policy document somewhere and be left there, right? Or may be drafted and left there. So, how do we translate that to actionable items?
So, absolutely, none of what I've said today is easy to do. I think, all of these things require tremendous amounts of commitment from all of the people involved, and particularly for institutions working in resource-constrained contexts. So, wealthy institutions don't have much of an excuse. Institutions that are working in very difficult circumstances, of course, some of these transformations will be hard to make. Having said that, I've been very lucky to have worked in lots of different contexts in Latin America, Africa, and to some extent Asia, including in some very low income contexts. And one of the things that might be surprising to people looking at the institutions at the top of some of those sustainability rankings I was mentioned is that some of the best practice in this area have actually seen at very low income countries in resource constrained universities, because actually a lot of these things it can be done through very close, vibrant, open connections between universities and their communities and local environments. So actually, there's a lot of very good practice that can be carried out by universities, even if they aren't blessed with a huge endowment. There's a lot of critical work that can take place between institutions and local communities through those collaborations and through the work of their students and staff. So I think there's a lot that all kinds of institutions can do.
Right. Thank you so much, Professor Tristan McCowan, for your engaging and enthralling presentation. I look forward to hearing much more about how we can build resilient institutions as it relates to climate change and the impact of the climate crisis on, we small island developing states, right? And how we may compete on that global on a global scale of higher education institutions as well. Thank you again, Professor McCowan. And again, the questions can be answered in the chat as the presentations go on. Up next, we have a presentation from Ms. Heidi Green and Ms. Megan Rees, where they'll be looking at when integrity is tested, understanding security in the assessment life cycle. Please make them welcome.
Thank you so much, Najee, and thank you all for having us here today. My name is Megan Rees. I'm the Security Investigations Lead at Cambridge University Press and Assessment. So I work within a cross-functional security team leading global investigations into test security incidents, ranging from things like malpractice to large-scale fraud. And I'm joined today by my colleague Heidi.
Everyone, my name is Heidi Green. I'm the Security Intelligence Lead working in the Central Security Team at Cambridge University Press and Assessment. So Megan and I work very closely together on the security of both our products and our business. Megan's more on the investigation side and myself on the intelligence side. And as I'm sure you can imagine, those two things go hand in hand very closely. Hopefully I'm sharing the screen okay. Please shout if that's not correct or you can see the incorrect view. But yeah, if that's all right, I'll hand over to Megan to get us kicked off.
Thanks, Heidi. Slides look great from my end. So as I said, thank you for inviting us to be here with you today. It's really exciting to see so many people on the call, and we're really glad that we can be part of these discussions. We've been talking about the importance of education, especially with regards to equity and equality, but also the impact that those graduates have on society. And if you imagine the sort of impact that any one student can have or should have on society, we also have to reflect on how well we can trust that their credentials are real and honestly earned. And the key question here is, what are your credential and assessment providers doing to ensure that their qualifications are valid and reliable? And I'm hoping our presentation today will be able to guide you through the process that we, as Cambridge University Press and Assessment, have in place to ensure the integrity of our qualifications. And understanding test security is increasingly critical to ensuring the validity of those credentials. And we're going to touch very briefly on some of the security considerations that we have in that assessment process, things that we seek to protect to ensure the integrity and the security of our credentials is there, so that they can be trusted and relied upon across all jurisdictions. This includes things like certificate and credential fraud, as well as things like exam day fraud. So that's cheating on the actual exams, trying to gain access to content early, wearing sort of in-ear cheating devices so that candidates can get those answers to them in a way that defrauds the assessment process. We're going to touch on this, give you an idea of the whole picture before, a candidate might get that credential. And then we'll look at some real world cases that we have investigated, disrupted, and managed as a team with regards to credential integrity. We're going to look at key risks, real world cases, and practical steps that you can take in your day-to-day jobs to help you spot those red flags and collaborate effectively with other assessment providers or credential evaluators. We're hoping this speaks directly to the theme from shock to stability. How do you ensure the security, integrity, and validity of your exams? How do you respond to emerging threats and ensure that you're one step ahead of the bad guys? We're going to leave some time for questions at the end of the presentation, but as Najee has said, please don't let this stop you from asking questions as we go along. There is that Q&A function, so please add your questions in there and then we'll seek to go through them all at the end. So who are we? Heidi, if we can go on to the next slide, please. Thank you. Heidi and I work for Cambridge University Press and Assessment, who are a subsidiary of the University of Cambridge, and we are a global publisher and assessment provider. This means that for the role that Heidi and I do, our role focuses on ensuring the security of the assessment process, ensuring the integrity of the credentials held by candidates, and ensuring that they're obtained legitimately and can be relied upon. Many of you probably know the Cambridge name, but you might not know that we are associated with all of the products that are on the screen. So we have Cambridge OCR, who are for UK learners. These are GCSEs, A-levels, and vocational qualifications. We have Cambridge International, who offer something similar, the International GCSE and A-levels, and these are offered to learners across over 160 countries. And we have Cambridge English, and this is our English language testing. Things like IELTS, Cambridge English qualifications, LinguaSkill, that all seek to be able to demonstrate a candidate's quality of English speaking, whether they are seeking to immigrate abroad or to do study abroad at other universities, for example. Each of these products on screen have their own operations and compliance teams. So they have quite a big team working behind them to be able to deliver that service. And that is the primary place where any malpractice or maladministration or whistleblower concerns about the security and integrity of our products are dealt with. The really big things are then referred on to Heidi and myself within a group called Group Security. And that's if they need any of that specialized security support. We also have included on here the brand protection team who sit within legal. They work very closely with us and support us for things like DMCA notices, cease and desists for kind of those products like fake certificates that might use our name fraudulently and without our permission. So we work very closely with them on things like fake domains, fake certificates, or the use of our name to elicit information from victims, for example. So I'm going to hand over to Heidi now, who's going to talk to us a little bit about the threat landscape.
Thank you, Megan. So to look at our overall threat landscape, we've outlined some trends on this slide. So these are threats that we face throughout the assessment lifecycle. So we heard in the opening remarks about those inevitable shocks and disruptions, including the pandemic, world events, digital developments, and AI, and all of those things impact assessment security as well. Threat actors are organized. They can often have a very significant reach. They can often even operate internationally and have sophisticated technical skills. On top of that, a lot of the exploits they seek to operate may be overlapping or even interconnected. So to give a bit of a flavor of what we work on as a team, here's what our threat landscape looks like today. So we've got organized proxy testing. So that is impersonation or substitute testing at an organized group level, sometimes with a global operating model. So candidates acting in bad faith will pay significant sums of money for somebody else to take their test on their behalf in order to gain a better score. Then we have content theft. We would also call this item harvesting or content harvesting. And this is where a bad actor will attempt to gain access to genuine test content, so exam papers or items or questions, and exfiltrate that out of the test environment. So that might be with an aim of gaining an advantage themselves, so in order to answer those questions correctly, or with the aim of selling that content on for financial gain. We have technical exploits. So our businesses all operate digitally these days. Whilst we as Cambridge still offer some paper-based exams, a lot of our examinations are delivered digitally as well. And threat actors will seek to identify vulnerabilities in those systems and exploit them. Then we have insider threats. So these could be malicious, somebody deliberately seeking to leak content or information for various motives. Could be negligent insider threats, so via laziness or disengagement, or even accidental as a result of overburdened staff, for example. But all of those present a threat to the security of our operations. Then we have bribery. So some threat actors, instead of seeking out their own vulnerabilities to exploit, will just try and pay their way to get to what they want. So they might offer employees or centre staff members bribes to gain access to content or exam papers or change scores on databases, etc. And then we have beyond the test itself. So some threats might seek to bypass the test entirely. So those might be fake certificates or doctored certificates, diploma mills, so fraudulent organizations that sell false credentials or false certificates, degrees in exchange for money. And we also have fake verification sites. So these often mimic genuine verification platforms, making it easier for fraudsters to validate those fake credentials that they sell. Or alternatively, they could actually be set up to harvest candidate login credentials for legitimate sites. So where candidates enter a username and password, they may be accidentally or inadvertently giving that away to a threat actor, then allowing that threat actor to steal or clone those real results. And it's this category, these things on the right-hand side of the screen that we're going to focus on today. We feel this is hopefully of more relevance to you as an audience coming from universities, some of you perhaps being involved in the admissions process as well. So I'm now going to hand back to Megan. Megan, can you talk us through the cost of leaving these threats untreated?
Thank you, Heidi. So I'm hoping that a lot of these will feel quite obvious to many of you on the call, but to just go through them and touch on them very briefly, we have the most pertinent at the top. If we allow this sort of cheating activity to go unchecked, we run the risk of individuals obtaining invalid or fraudulent credentials. It also means that as a credential provider, there is a loss of trust in, for example, our institution and the certification that we are providing. These credentials can be used to obtain further education or careers that have a direct impact on society, and so they need to be trusted. Which leads on to the next point. Workplace hires where individuals aren't fully qualified is a big risk if we aren't able to protect the integrity of our qualifications. It means that individuals might not be fit for the role that they're applying for. It also means that you as an organisation have hired someone who has low integrity and that other legitimate candidates for that role underwent an unfair recruitment process because someone who has cheated has been given the role. Think also about medical professionals, elevator technicians, electricians. Imagine trusting someone in one of these roles who's never gone through the full training or even actually qualified or sat the exam or known the answers correctly as part of that testing process. They have not passed that exam to a certain standard. But also, what if someone has cheated on an exam that's a requirement for visas and immigration? So a little bit like our English language tests. Someone is then able to obtain a visa without putting the work in. Criminals, we know, can exploit this to move between countries. And that has a very big implication on things like organised criminal activity or the ability of those affiliated with terrorist organisations to move between borders. It opens risk. It allows the individual to present themselves as something they're not. And it adds credibility to a visa application that might otherwise raise a red flag. We have to think about candidates who have gained credentials via professional cheating services, for example. These services might seek to bribe or extort those individuals for information in their future roles. And what if that person used one of their fraudulently gained credentials to gain a government job, and they are a government employee who are then being extorted for information because that professional service is then threatening to reveal all about the fact that they actually cheated on their exam? And beyond that, we should consider the wider community risk from illegal funds. With crime, there is often a larger operator that we can't see. So a bad actor making money from selling fake certificates or diplomas could also be engaged in other illegal activity, and maybe even funding that activity from their earnings. Heidi and I recently learned at another conference that the Norwegian terror attack of 2011 was partially funded by a fake diploma mill run by the attacker. It's an example of fraudulently obtained funds being used for illicit or illegal activity. So I'll hand over to Heidi now to explore who the victims of that compromise might actually be.
Thank you, Megan. So certificate fraud can affect multiple stakeholders. So firstly, and perhaps most obviously, the buyers and the customers of these services. So we'll go in to explore this using a few examples, but a candidate may knowingly shortcut their way to a credential by buying a fake certificate. And there's a case to be made that they've knowingly bought into that service. So any repercussions of that result not being verified are on them. However, these buyers can be the victims as well. So candidates may pay for what they believe to be a legitimate certificate, only to find out that they've actually been scammed. They may even be led to believe that they have sat a real exam. Or even if they purchase a fake credential, a fake certificate, knowing that it's fake, in doing so, they are handing over a lot of their personal information to essentially an unknown person who is a criminal, and they may be opening themselves up, as Megan said, to blackmail later down the line. So they can very much be the victim here too. Then, of course, we have institutions as the victim. So this may resonate with you as universities. You may be being put at risk of admitting unqualified learners. We have employers as well who are at risk of hiring based on that false information, which, depending on the industry or the job role, could be putting somebody in a job that they are fundamentally unqualified. And that can be become an issue of public and societal safety beyond the risk to the employer themselves. So that all makes it more difficult for credential evaluators and the people reviewing these results and certificates to do their jobs when scrutinizing credentials. Then we also have certification providers, so that's credential issuers like ourselves. We also lose out from this business. We face reputational damage, potentially even regulatory consequences if things go wrong. So when people fake our certificates, they are essentially conducting fraud in our name, and that can have very serious consequences. This also means that registration fees don't make their way to us, so we're missing out financially as well. And if our reputation is damaged, this also runs the risk of potential candidates, potential recognizing bodies or credential evaluators going elsewhere instead because our assessments have lost their validity and meaning. And finally, we have other candidates. So when that trust erodes, legitimate candidates suffer as well. The vast majority of candidates, we know, we're really talking about the small percentages in this presentation because we know that the vast majority of candidates want to earn that credential honestly. They will have worked hard themselves. They will have sacrificed time away from friends and family, sacrificed money to undertake that study and that exam. So when they see somebody else taking a shortcut to the same outcome, they would understandably feel aggrieved by that. They may also go on to miss out on further opportunities that they may be deserving of if a different candidate with a false credential is hired into a role over them, for example, or takes place at a further study institution that they then miss out on. So this can all have very real impacts on multiple groups of people. So now we'd like to talk through some case studies concerning some of the types of credential fraud that we've come across. So I'm going to pass over to Megan to get us started. Megan.
Thanks, Heidi. So the first of these is probably the most obvious, which is fake and doctored certificates. This can be in terms of certificates created in isolation. So a candidate who has created their own certificate in the image of your institution, they've copied those that they've seen their friends have obtained or their family members have obtained or they've seen posted online. Or doctoring certificates they've been able to get hold of online so that they have their own name on them. These are often easier to spot than some of the more complex cases that we'll talk about because they don't always have a great level of sophistication. So either they're not using a very good software to be able to create these doctored certificates, which means that the image quality and the changes that they've made are very obvious because things like font size, color, font type are really obvious, but also things like holographic stamps that you will see on quite a few certificates nowadays. They don't exist, or they've been poorly replicated, or a corresponding QR code that might be on a certificate doesn't resolve to the correct candidate name. In addition to that, you can also verify that person's name in an organization's database. So a lot of university admissions or workplace admissions will check with the credential provider that that individual does hold that certification, and they just won't exist with the same score profile or with that name in the organization's database. But these things, so fake and doctored certificates, can also be used by criminal organizations who make money from producing fairly good quality certificates. I mean, sometimes not, but we have seen some fairly good quality certificates come from these widespread criminal organizations, and they are selling them to candidates just to make money. We've seen sellers provide their own software tools to candidates as well to make their own. Luckily, these often advertise that they're really accurate and they're really good versions of certificates so that the candidates will part with money, and they simply aren't, and we're able to spot them easily. But things like tip lines and whistleblower kind of reporting are really helpful to let us know about these so that we can then work closely with our brand protection team to take the site down and take action against the people behind them. Heidi, if we can go on to the next slide, please. Thank you. So our certificates, you'll see an example on the right-hand side. They often have a centre and a school added onto the certificate where an exam took place. So they will always have a centre number, a number listed on the certificate. Fake certificates often attempt to either fool the candidate. So we've seen examples of fake centre numbers that are put on there to make it look like that's an institution where the exam was sat. And they're simply added to make the certificate look legitimate. So the candidate thinks that they're buying something that is legitimate, or they're trying to fool us. So threat actors might research and use actual centre numbers, but the fake certificate is flagged only when a centre might say, hey, I've been contacted by a candidate and they're asking questions about the certificate, but we've never heard of them before. We don't know their name, but they are essentially saying that they've been certified by us as a centre. And we have one particular example of this that occurred with a candidate in Italy, which is what this slide is about. So to walk you through, candidate A got in touch with our legitimate customer services team to report not receiving their certificates for exams that they had sat. And they noticed an issue when they said that they didn't have access to or have the login credentials for our online results platform. The candidate provided us with their certificate number and we sought to verify their results. When we looked up the certificate verification number, this actually led back to a completely different candidate, candidate B, who was confirmed as legitimate with us. But as part of due process, we went back to candidate A to ask for some more information, and they provided images of the certificates that they had received, and we could find no trace of their name in our system, but they were all issued from one particular centre. So we then went to that centre and we checked with them, and they confirmed that they did not know who candidate A was, but they did know candidate B, who they had worked very closely with, was a candidate at their school and had sat an exam at their location. So it transpires that candidate B's certificate details were being used by a third-party school, completely unrelated to the legitimate centre, to issue fake certificates, and they were doing this on a large scale. This school had also been using the contact details of 3 other legitimate Cambridge centres to falsify certificates, and they were doing this by creating a stamp and a seal that pretended to be from a legitimate centre that was with us. And this basically implied that the candidate had sat exams at a legitimate centre when they actually had not. In this case, the candidate evidently thought they had bought a legitimate certificate from the seller. Now, that's not to say that the candidate was actually doing something legitimate. They thought they'd bought a real certificate, but they most certainly would have known that they had not sat the exam. So we can infer from this that they knew the purchase was not a legitimate one. They just thought they were parting with a large sum of money for an actual real certificate. And they were expecting that when they presented the certificate to us as Cambridge, as the credential provider, we would then be able to validate that certificate as being legitimate, because the seller was obviously telling the candidate that this is the case. It simply wasn't. We were able to identify that the candidate didn't exist, and the centre was actually being defrauded using their stamp. So unfortunately, this meant that the candidate did not gain a qualification. And also, given the unknowns around the motives for obtaining that certificate, we issued a ban on that candidate for a period of time, and they weren't able to retake any of our exams as a consequence of this action. So not only did they not actually obtain a legitimate certificate in the first place, they also failed to be able to actually enter for any of our exams legitimately later on down the line. As for the third-party prep school, they were actively defrauding Cambridge's name and the names of 3 centres, 3 legitimate centres with us, whose names were added to those certificates. And we worked closely with our brand protection team and our legal team to take action against that school for using our name without a permission, and we were also able to escalate the case to local police for action in the locality. I'll hand over to Heidi now to talk through another case study.
Thank you. So, as well as fake certificates, we've also encountered fake exams. So, I mentioned earlier that sometimes buyers of these services may have been duped into thinking that they've purchased a place in a real exam and genuinely earned the certificate that they buy. Now, obviously, if you're going to sell a fake certificate to someone and you want them to believe that it's really been issued by Cambridge, then you're going to have to take some steps to increase the believability. And one of those will be simulating that an actual exam has in fact taken place. So we have in the past received queries from candidates who have been duped into buying these certificates, who have reported to going to an exam at a physical location. And when we cross-reference that against our database, we have no record of that exam ever having happened. We've also seen instances like this example that you can see on the screen, where candidates are supposedly taking a digital exam remotely at home. So it might be a little hard to see. We've covered the images of all of the faces of people on the call, but hopefully you can see that they're sat at home on a remote call. Now, Megan and I know that the qualification that they're supposedly taking is not one that we offer as an at-home digital test. So we know very obviously that this is fake. We can also see, if you look closely enough, that this is actually a Google Meet call. A secure digital test would never happen on a platform like Google Meet or Teams or Zoom. But unfortunately, these candidates were none the wiser. They thought they were taking an actual English language exam. This specific example is one that we actually found via online monitoring. This had never been reported to us by any candidates, but we came across it in the course of our regular online monitoring. We were able to then take action from there to stop this organisation from selling false certificates. Another thing that we'd like to talk through is false channels of verification, and Megan is going to take us through some examples of that.
Thanks, Heidi. So fake verification sites seek to impersonate legitimate certificate verification portals. So these are portals that credential and assessment providers will have created so that you can enter certificate details such as certificate numbers, center number, candidate name, candidate details to verify that they do hold the credential that they claim to have. The fake verification sites seek to mimic the branding, the layout, the terminology of real certification bodies, often word for word, layout for layout. And what's interesting is the domain names are often created to look identical. So they'll often, at a quick glance, read as if they say Cambridge, but on closer inspection, there might be two I's in the name, for example, or a full stop where it shouldn't be. And these are created to predominantly validate forged credentials as part of a wider operation, giving a false sense of legitimacy to counterfeit certificates. So users such as credential evaluators or admissions personnel are directed to this fake verification channel where they can enter that fake certificate number, and the site then returns a fabricated valid result. And some of these fake verification sites can be sophisticated, and they can generate downloadable PDFs or digital badges or QR codes that then link back to that fake site. And these sites, really, the biggest thing to say is operate on social engineering. If the evaluator or verifier sees a professional looking page with the right branding, they might very well trust it. And these sites may simultaneously seek to harvest legitimate certificate information. So where a verifier might input legitimate certificate information into that fake site, they're then providing the attacker with legitimate candidate details that can be fed back into that machine and used to create fake certificates. So it kind of self-fulfills as an operating model. They may also seek to harvest the login information of credential evaluators. So if verification services are hidden behind a login screen and evaluators are directed to that fake site, they might input their username and password, and therefore they have provided their legitimate login credentials to a threat actor who can then use those to gain access to the legitimate verification site, compromising the security of that platform. Heidi, if we can go on to the next slide, please. So these fake verification sites are set up to deceive people into thinking that, they are the official Cambridge verification site. We have two examples there on the right-hand side. They are sophisticated. They are almost identical. And the links on the fake website redirect to legitimate Cambridge websites. So, for example, you might click into one of these and it says About Us. And then you click on the link and it would take you to the legitimate Cambridge website About Us page. So you'll notice that the two images look very similar with some very, very minor differences. So differences, for example, in some bold font and some spacing and the box configuration. And the key here is to know what the legitimate domain looks like so that you can spot the fake one up front. If you were able to actually see the domain here, our legitimate domain, this basically mimicked it, except for a single full stop difference. But again, if you were aware of what the legitimate domain should look like, you'd be able to spot that there were some irregularities there. And we've seen cases of identical domains being set up to communicate with buyers. The buyers then pass that email address onto the university or workplace, who then reach out to the fake domain or email for verification, where they can either pretend to be us, they can verify over a fake email, or they can direct to a fake verification service. It therefore never comes across our desk as Cambridge until the issue is flagged in a different way. And we don't see those fake communications until it's reported via official means or via in-country staff or via our Speak Up portal. For this particular investigation that you're seeing on screen, this did span the space of about a year. We worked very closely with our brand protection team to take down the fake infringing websites. And I will say one of the issues with these sorts of sites is that every time you take one down, another one pops back up in its place. So we are playing a bit of a game of whack-a-mole, but we do have some very kind of good online monitoring that's in place, picking up a lot of keywords. It protects our domain names. It finds anything trying to copy it or replicate what our domain will look like. And so there is sort of a continuous process whereby we're taking down these sites. But we also decided that we needed to uncover some more information about the people behind this site. So it's all well and good constantly taking down the websites, but if you can't actually do anything to stop those individuals, then it just becomes an eternal game of cat and mouse that you're playing. So we conducted some test purchases, which is a covert capability that we have within the security team of that service to identify any additional kind of Facebook profiles or mobile telephone numbers or email addresses that were linked to the individuals behind this website, and to potentially find out their names so that we could take action. And the good news story is that we were able to identify a number of linked social media accounts as a result of that test purchase. And this included things like Facebook pages and WhatsApp numbers. And this eventually led us to a group of individuals who had been linked to previous cases of impersonation and impersonating websites. And we were able to work with our legal team for some enforcement actions. And this included some in-country legal services, and we were able to pass the case to a local prosecutor's office. And we actually took action against the names of those individuals, against those named individuals, and we were also able to have the kind of selectors, the social media accounts taken down as well. And Heidi, if we can go on to the next page, please. And you'll see again on this slide, this is a very good replica of our actual LinguaSkill verification website. So one of these shows the LinguaSkill results verification site. One shows an impersonation that was recently flagged to us by our brand protection team. And they identified this via our online monitoring. And this is proactive monitoring of our use of our brand names and logos. And luckily, this was spotted before any candidates seem to have been caught out by it, before anybody really knew much about it. And as soon as the site was flagged, it was triaged to us in security. We interrogated the site, we captured all the necessary evidence that we needed, and then we also were able to confirm with our recognition team that it was definitely nothing to do with us. And if you have a look here at the domains, you'll spot the missing full stop in the URL. So again, very subtle differences, but our legitimate page has a results.linguaskill.com, and then the illegitimate page does not. It's just results linguaskill. It would certainly look legitimate to somebody taking it at face value. But if you click through on the actual website itself as well, a lot of the links weren't functional. There was a lot of placeholder Latin text that you would get from a bog standard kind of build your own website that hadn't been replaced to look legitimate at all. And this website, of course, was flagged in our online monitoring, and we were able to identify it really, really quickly. As soon as it was confirmed as fake, we reported it via our brand protection team, and it was swiftly removed before we have any evidence of any candidates ever using it. So we've explored fake certificates, fake exams, and fake verification sites and domains. But what happens when this all comes together in one big incident? Heidi's going to walk us through our next case study.
Thank you, Megan. So finally, in terms of the examples that we're going to talk you through today, we wanted to highlight this case that happened in Vietnam a few years ago. So we thought this was a good example because it exhibited a lot of the features that we've been through in the previous slides. So they advertised on social media, particularly on Facebook, and some candidates sat simulated exams. And there was an accompanying fake verification site used to verify the fake certificates that this organization was selling in the country. This was initially reported to us by exam centres, so our schools in the region. And from that, we then launched an investigation that involved us in the security team, our colleagues in brand protection, and also in collaboration with the police in Vietnam as well. And ultimately, very long story short, that led to 5 people being jailed for running that operation, which for us was obviously a very positive conclusion to what had been until this point quite a significant problem in Vietnam. Prosecution isn't something that we can always reach in terms of like a legal conclusion, but it's obviously nice when we can. So next, we wanted to cover off what we would deem to be the red flags for credential evaluators, for people reviewing our certificates, to be aware of when they're doing this. So some of these, especially in light of what we've talked you through today, might seem very straightforward, but hopefully these will be useful to cover off. So firstly, we have perhaps the most obvious, any certificates received from unverifiable or suspicious sources should be a red flag to you. So these could be received from many different sources all of the time. But if you are reviewing certificates, that's ones issued by Cambridge or any awarding organisation, really, you should be ready to question those when the source doesn't feel quite right or isn't what you would usually expect. Next, we have inconsistent test performance history. So think about, has somebody made previous applications to your institution and they've maybe not achieved the required score, and suddenly they've turned up with a certificate for holding the result that they need. That could, of course, be the result of legitimate study to make up that shortfall, but a check on the performance history can often be useful in flagging inconsistencies that perhaps need some further scrutiny. Next, we have unusual certificate patterns. So similarly, you likely have for your institutions a good understanding of what qualifications or what groups of qualifications people are likely to build up in order to apply. So any outliers to that, any aberrants to those patterns could be an indication that perhaps a further check is needed on their certificates that they're presenting to you. Next is, of course, visual document anomalies. This should probably be a bit higher up on the list. Most credential providers, Cambridge included, will have security features on their certificates. So those could be signatures, seals, printed markings, or hidden UV markings. And if those security features are missing or they don't look quite right, then that's a surefire red flag that the certificate may not be real. And lastly, any request being made to direct you as the recipient or verifier of a certificate, any request being made to direct you to another channel to verify that result should be a concern. So we have, as we've talked through, those results verification services for our qualifications. For us, those are our single source of truth. And for that reason, we do not verify results over email, over the phone, or by any other channel. You will always be directed to those results verification services. So if somebody in terms of Cambridge qualifications is claiming to be Cambridge and emailing you the result or saying, oh, I can verify that for you over the phone, then that's very likely an impersonation and an indication that the result is faked. So these are the things that we advise you to be looking out for. And just as important in looking out for those red flags is knowing what to do when you see any of those. So it goes without saying that you should always report any concerns to the certificate provider. So for Cambridge qualifications, that is directly to us in Cambridge, or for IELTS, that's either to an IELTS partner security team or via the online exam security reporting form. Obviously, other awarding organisations will have their own channels for reporting such concerns. But just a warning that we like to include at this stage: never take things into your own hands investigation-wise. You can, of course, have the very best intentions, but you could be putting yourself in harm's way or at risk by engaging with these threat actors. As we've touched on throughout this presentation, the people selling these fake certificates and running these organizations are by nature criminals, and they could be dangerous. We have actually in the past received reports of somebody working at a university who received a fake certificate and they wanted to investigate it themselves. They engaged with that certificate seller via a messaging app, and in doing so, they inadvertently revealed their real name to that person, who then actually threatened them. We in our security team, in our jobs, are in a position to conduct those investigations safely, so please do leave it to us. And with that, I will pass back to Megan to speak through the role of credential evaluators.
Thank you, Heidi. And I think the most important takeaway here is that exam and credential integrity is a collective effort. And we don't just work in siloed roles, and we're all aligned on the shared goal of fairness, validity, and trust. Credential evaluators, admissions boards, assessment providers, we can all help each other by spotting these red flags early and having good forums such as this to be able to discuss the issues that we see and be able to work together in communicating those things early. So some key takeaways: verification and validation. Confirming the authenticity of certificates and test results is really important, and advocating for trusted and secure databases and registries for that verification is vital. This includes being able to validate that a verification service is legitimate and isn't a spoofed URL or domain, and having those sort of communications channels in place early so that you are speaking to the right people, and if something doesn't feel right, you can stop for a moment, double check if something is known, or you can double check via a confirmed communication channel that you have in place to be able to ensure kind of that what the site that you're using is correct, which leads nicely on to the detection of anomalies and red flags. As Heidi has discussed, spotting those inconsistencies in test scores, in dates, in the format of credentials, or identifying suspicious document features such as strange fonts, logos, seals, that sort of thing is really important. And just as important is knowing who to report those to. So if you don't know exactly who should be receiving those reports with the universities or the credential providers that you work closely with, it's probably something that you should seek to do. Speak to your contacts within those credential provider organizations. They will have security teams that are looking into this and who are best placed to be able to take action with those suspicious items. And then next we have on here collaboration and communication. Sharing insights with assessment providers, credential providers, and also evaluators and security teams promptly is really important. And being able to report those patterns of fraudulent behavior that you might be able to spot in your role, and being able to report those not just to security teams, but also to professional associations or regulators is really important. And being able to advocate for that standardized, transparent verification process is a key way to being able to ensure that we're communicating about these things correctly. And similar to that is staying informed and keeping up to date with any new fraud tactics or fake credential platforms and technology that threat actors might be using. And this includes participating in training on document forensics and digital security tools, being able to monitor changes in the global education and assessment system. And if you're going to use a third party to verify results, we know there are quite a few platforms out there that seek to bring together a lot of credential evaluators into one platform, so that you just have to search one candidate name in one platform and it will return results from lots of different providers. You need to be alive to the fact that fake versions of these sites might pop up, and you should always ask any vendors that you're engaging with to verify what they're doing, to verify that they know about the threat of fake verification sites and impersonation, and also to know what their security teams are doing about that. It's a really important question to ask as part of that tender process. And finally, we have on here information sharing. Forums like this are a great place to discuss how these sort of threats might happen, how they might impact you in your day-to-day role, and also what data sharing agreements might need to be put in place between organizations in order to be able to communicate effectively about these issues and share information quickly. Create those processes for sharing that intelligence, and be able to kind of talk openly with your colleagues in different organizations about fraud trends and suspicions. Things like forums, mailing groups, conferences are a great place to do that. And this might also include global or regional task forces or initiatives taken against exam fraud. It's important to build these networks across regions to be able to spot those cross-border and cross-accreditor fraud schemes that might be in place. But it's all well and good me sitting here saying, credential evaluators or people in admissions who are working with these things closely should be doing all of these things to make sure that we can protect ourselves against the fraud. But what can you expect from us as an assessment provider and as a security team within an assessment provider? Heidi's going to take you through that.
Thank you, Megan. So I mentioned not taking investigations into your own hands. This is where you would hand things off to us. So when a security concern is reported to us, we will always take that seriously. We will always investigate that to the fullest possible extent. And that is in close collaboration with a lot of the other teams that we've mentioned throughout this presentation. We can't always share the details of that investigation back to the reporter, but rest assured that doesn't mean that we aren't investigating that internally. We do have methods of engaging covertly and safely where it is required. When we do this, we will always conduct a risk assessment first. We'll consider the proportionality, the necessity of any investigative action. And depending on the purpose of that collection, we may also consider the admissibility of any evidence we collect. So we in our teams are positioned to be able to do that safely and legally. So that's why we always ask that you leave that to us. Before the point of investigation, though, there are other things that we in a security-based team do to protect our credentials. A lot of this comes down to good awareness. We will assist with creating any proactive or reactive training materials or communications to potential candidates, schools, universities, and credential evaluators to make sure that we are all best placed to avoid scams like the ones that we've talked through today. We've also talked through those fake verification websites that often accompany these scams. So we are very proactive about making sure that we own the domains that may be used to impersonate us as Cambridge, even if we aren't using them ourselves, and to renew those certificates of those domains that we do use. Our brand protection team are particularly proactive about web scanning for any websites that could be used for nefarious purposes, like the ones we've shown you today. So they are well positioned to issue complaints about them and get them taken down quickly before they can cause real harm. Some of the real examples we've shown today were removed by our brand protection team before they were ever used to dupe a candidate or to sell a certificate. So that's really positive. We in a group security team also sit across the entire business, as Megan explained at the beginning. So we are in this kind of unique all-seeing position where we can document threats and methodologies centrally. We have a system internally for doing that, which allows us to interrogate incident data, identify those trends, and inform a more proactive approach to securing our assessments and credentials. We also have tech integration. So a lot of the fake certificate exploits we've talked through today rely on some kind of manipulation to the document itself. But we are in this position where we have central verification portals that act as that single source of truth. So kind of taking away that reliance on paper and detecting anomalies in a document. So a credential evaluator can search centrally and they can trust the results of that search. We in security teams play a big role in making those systems secure by design. And we're also consulted by the business on any new developments, such as system configurations. We work with technical and security architecture colleagues who help shape the secure design of those systems as well. And we're always looking to the future. We're always cognizant of future developments that could further secure the credential evaluation process as a whole. So thinking about things like AI, biometric verification, digital signatures as well. And by return on that information sharing front, we also seek to collaborate further with industry forums like this one to share our best practice, to learn from each other, as that makes us all stronger together. So that brings us to the end of the slides we'll be presenting. Thank you very much for joining and listening. Hopefully that gives you a bit of a flavour of just a small aspect of what we as Cambridge do to deliver secure, reliable assessments to ultimately strengthen those standards and protect learning. This is how we move from shock to stability. But before we go to Q&A, the only thing left to say is please do feel free to contact us, maybe via the Q&A or the chat function. If you'd like any more information about any of our qualifications that we've talked through today, Megan and I are both happy to direct you to the right team if you're thinking of involving Cambridge products in your program anymore. Aside from that, thank you again for listening. I think we should have some time for questions or any thoughts and reflections now. So I'll hand over to Mr. Murray to manage those for us.
Naisha is fine. Thank you. Right. So before we get to the question and answer, what we should have said at the beginning is that the University Council of Jamaica first connected rather with Megan and Heidi in November of 2025, where we attended a webinar hosted by the Association of International Credential Evaluation Professionals. During this session, they delivered a presentation, the same one here, titled When Integrity is Tested, Understanding Security in the Assessment Life Cycle. The insights shared during the discussion highlighted the growing importance of safeguarding integrity in or of the assessment systems. Together, Megan and Heidi bring significant expertise in protecting the integrity of assessment systems. We trust that today's presentation provided valuable insight into alternative assessment methods, which will ultimately assist us in enhancing and strengthening our education systems, particularly in the evaluation of secondary credentials for admissions into tertiary or higher education institutions. Right. So one of the first things that came to mind when I was listening to your presentation is whether or not a victim has ever been charged with participating or with, receiving a diploma from one of these diploma mills.
So when you say a victim, Najai, do you mean a candidate, a buyer of any of these certificates? Yes. So from our perspective, we would really be seeking to kind of investigate further up that chain and ultimately get to the culprit of the operation, so the threat actor behind that. In terms of individual candidates, we as a business don't really have the appetite to pursue that at an individual level, at least legally. But there are actions that we would take, so sanctions against a candidate that we might take depending on the nature of the qualification or the nature of the offence. So sometimes that might include issuing a ban to that candidate and saying, well, you've purchased a fake version of this certificate. You will not be able to obtain that certificate genuinely now for a period of a few years, potentially even a lifetime ban. Those options are available to us. Depending on the market and the recognition of a qualification in that market, some countries do have the appetite to pursue that legally. We connected with some colleagues at the TICEP webinar series that you mentioned, Jai, that worked in a government arm in Norway, and that had actually been set up particularly with that objective. So they would receive reports from universities of fake certificates, fake diplomas. They would investigate that at an individual candidate level, and they would pursue legal sanctions against that candidate. So that's something that their government in that country had a really strong initiative to seek to stamp out and take action against. But in their context, they would never really be seeking to investigate beyond that or seek to find where this person purchased that exam. So I suppose it's different markets, different qualifications, different assessments might dictate what the kind of appetite is for pursuing that legally. But in short, for us, it would really be kind of drilling down to the threat actor behind that operation. And at that point is when we would usually become more interested in pursuing some kind of legal end to that.
Thank you so much. Is that you would like to add something as well, Megan?
No, I think Heidi kind of summarized very well there, actually. I would say, I think we've got a question in the chat that probably relates to this quite well, actually, which is about litigation. And I would say that working with credential providers is really important. They should be looking at these issues. So where you might not be able to take a lot of action against a candidate, credential providers certainly can if they're able to identify that candidate obtains their credential fraudulently. you can issue things such as bans, whether this is for a year, 2 years, or a lifetime, probably depends and is proportionate to the fraud that was undertaken. And it also depends whether a candidate may have been tricked by a threat actor, by a bad actor, into thinking what they were doing was legitimate, like one of those fake exams, versus them knowing full well that they are employing, for example, a proxy test taker to go and take the test in their position. That might be something like a lifetime ban. So I would say there are things that can be done to enforce those penalties on the candidates themselves, but it's one of those issues where I think the most successful thing that can be done is to take action against the threat actor, the bad actor, whether this is taking down their websites, monitoring their social media accounts, trying to take action against them so that their online platform is smaller so that they can have less of an impact. Those sorts of things can be quite useful in scenarios like this as well.
Interesting. So, one of the questions we have here from Nicole Williams is Jamaica is not a very litigious nation. As such, most students who perform academic credentialing fraud fraud tend to get a slap on the wrist or not being penalized at all. How do colleges administrators and workers deal with the moral and professional imperatives that may be the rationale for not reporting or pursuing cases of students' credential fraud?
So I think, the biggest thing there, just to kind of reiterate kind of what the discussion we were just having, is being able to issue those bans and work with the credential providers to issue those bans against the candidates. I think it's really difficult when you don't have many strings to be able to put on in terms of litigation. So things that are within credential providers' power are to be able to issue those bans to say this candidate can't actually obtain this credential legitimately. But also, as we mentioned in the slides, having forums in which you can share that information openly with other admissions boards, with other credential providers, with other universities and colleges, to say, look, we're aware of this candidate. This candidate has attempted to obtain a certain qualification fraudulently. You might want to go and check against this candidate's name and your own qualifications to see if they've done something similar with you. Similarly, if you are able to link a particular case where a candidate has used a service fraudulently, you can also flag the name of that service to other colleagues and other institutions so that they can check to see if they have any platform online where that service is interacting with their products as well.
So tell me something. How prevalent is a fraud that you experience? Does it keep you extremely busy?
It certainly
Or
keeps us in our
is
jobs. I mean, I would say the majority of the stuff that we see is prevalent but not very sophisticated. So it's really easy to spot. Doesn't mean that we shouldn't be doing anything about it. So we work very closely with all these takedowns, with pursuing action. I would say it also varies between regions. So we see quite sophisticated, widespread attempts at fraud in China quite a lot of the time. And I would say less so maybe in certain areas in Europe, for example. So we have bigger teams working in certain areas globally where that resource might be required. It is an issue, and I think for several reasons, actually, which is quite interesting. Heidi and I attended that TISEP conference at the end of last year that you mentioned, and they spoke about kind of UNESCO and their aims for global mobility. One of the bigger things as part of that conversation was kind of the reasons and the drivers for committing fraud. And an interesting point that was touched on was kind of global mobility, but also everyone having access to education. So sometimes education can be really, really expensive, and it's cheaper to attempt to gain a fake certificate cheaply than it is to actually pay for the exam. So there is kind of a broader conversation here, which is probably too long for the Q&A, about kind of making education really accessible to everybody and removing barriers to kind of global mobility that would probably drive down the attempts that we see at fraud in a lot of these cases.
Interesting. So another question I have is that does the security team seek to purchase these type of squatted domains that are discovered?
So that will really depend. Heidi, I don't know if you want to take this one.
Yeah, of course. So as I mentioned, we do a lot of domain management that sits between us in the security and the brand protection team. So In short, yes, we will seek to purchase domains that might be used to impersonate us. So maybe they have the Cambridge name in or are variations on our departments or our products. So we will seek to proactively own and manage those so they can't be used for nefarious purposes. But obviously, that's not a blanket measure. Threat actors are going to find a way around that. New ingenious ways of putting one full stop in one different place in a domain that we haven't purchased. And for that reason, we also supplement that domain management with the tools that I mentioned, like that web scanning, that social media monitoring, to proactively identify any impersonations of us or our brand. So those are based on searches like keywords against our name, our departments, our products, and also things like our logos as well. So usually we can spot this stuff pretty quickly. We often will receive reports through of, for example, a new website being set up that maybe has some version of Cambridge in the name that looks like it's going to be used for purposes like the ones we've outlined today, but we'll often see that website before there's actually any content on it. So when that's the case, we'll be keeping a very close eye on it. Maybe a few days after a domain is registered, we might see, okay, actually now our logo is appearing on that. And now we have the brand protection team to kind of use that mechanism to take that website down. So in short, yes, we are running that domain management, but we layer that with other things like that proactive web scanning, social media scanning to make sure that we are on top of that kind of thing.
Okay, so another question we have here from Nadine Samuels is, as more universities move towards online or hybrid assessments, what strategies are provided or proving more effective in maintaining exam integrity while still respecting student privacy and accessibility?
Would you like me to make a start on that one, Megan?
I feel like we can probably split it quite well. I guess the biggest thing for us is accessibility is really important in our exams, and so having digital or paper-based is something that we do attempt to offer. And obviously the benefits of having the digital assessment on offer is, you can change things like font size, you can have like audio readers for questions, that sort of thing. But similarly, we also do something with our paper base whereby we can print on certain colors, print in different fonts that make taking these exams easier for certain candidates. So just a quick note on kind of accessibility, it is still very much something that is at the forefront of everything that we do, and we try to make that work really well with our security measures that we put in place. So I guess for us, it really depends on the type of exam that's being offered. And the way Heidi and I sit in our team is Heidi looks very much at kind of the English language testing side of things. I very much look at the IGCSE and A-level. So it's probably going to be better for Heidi to kind of touch on the stuff that we do with the English language testing, as we do have a lot of the online digital assessments in that space. And then maybe I can add a few bits on in the end there with what we're doing on the IGCSE and A-level side of things.
Yeah, of course. And Nadine, this is probably one we could speak about, go on and on about. But just in terms of strategies that are proving most effective in terms of maintaining exam integrity and accessibility. So in a way, moving tests to a digital delivery modem can make them more accessible. So instead of candidates maybe having to make travel plans to travel to an in-person test center and take an exam at a test point, which they may be far away from. Some of our at-home assessments allow them to not have to leave their home and take an exam from home. So in a way that increases accessibility. But on the flip side of that, we very much still operate we operate in over 160 countries, as Megan said at the beginning. Some of those countries do not have the IT infrastructure, like the internet connection, to support digitally delivered tests. So for us, in a way, paper-based exams are still going to be a very big part of our operation for the foreseeable future, just because of some of the markets that we operate in not being able to support those digital assessments. But we obviously all live in this digital age. That is the way that things are moving. And we are very much trying to keep at pace with those innovations to make tests more accessible digitally where we can. So in terms of maintaining that exam integrity, as we've, I guess, briefly touched on in our presentation, with those digital innovations and developments, there comes this whole suite of digital innovations and developments in the assessment malpractice sphere. So I can see there's another question about smart glasses that could be relevant for at-home tests, so digital at-home tests, or in centres. All of these things, we have had to make changes, adapt our security modems, delivery modems, and security protocols to be able to detect and protect against. A lot of that is using technology to support that as well. So we've seen a proliferation, as I'm sure you can imagine, in AI-supported malpractice attempts. We are on the flip side of that now attempting to utilize AI to help improve our detection capabilities. So where a text input may look like it has been written by AI instead of a genuine candidate response, that's something that we see a lot of people attempting to do. So I guess it's kind of just we're trying to keep at pace with those developments. One challenge that we encounter there is that we, as Cambridge, as a relatively risk-averse global organization, have a lot of governance in place to make sure that when we make a change, for example, introducing AI into a process, that we're doing that in a way that doesn't impact accessibility or reliability, validity, or test integrity. So we are relatively cautious in that approach, and at the moment, always keeping humans in the loop of that approach. On the other side of that, threat actors don't have any governance structures in place. If they want to use or develop an AI tool to assist with a malpractice attack, nobody has to approve that. They can build a tool and they can go right ahead and use it. So that is one challenge that we do face in kind of keeping up with the threat actors. In a way, it's a game of cat and mouse. We'll find a way to detect or prevent a certain type of digital malpractice, and that will stop that happening. And the threat actors will then find a new type of digitally supported malpractice to use instead. So, as you mentioned, Ajay, we're kept plenty busy by keeping up with all of that stuff. It doesn't go away, it just changes and evolves. Sorry, I realise I've gone on for quite a while and I could probably keep going on in response to that question. Megan, is there anything else that you wanted to add from your side?
I was just going to add about kind of the smart glasses and in-ear cheating devices that we see as well. If we're talking kind of about the digital threats and maintaining exam integrity, it's something that we definitely see across kind of all of our modes of delivery. So, for example, paper-based delivery in a centre, in a school. We also have computer-based delivery in a centre or a school. So, for example, candidates will come into that centre and sit the exam at a computer that has been set up for them and is controlled by the school. And then also kind of at home on your own devices. And so there are different things we have to have in place to pick that sort of stuff up. We certainly have introduced like increased scans. So when it's an in-person exam, for example, being able to use kind of metal detection, bonding, and kind of visual checks. But I would say actually the most important thing is an education piece, both for the people doing the scanning in centre, but also our online proctors, our online kind of people who would watch an exam taking place and make sure there's no one kind of visibly cheating on an online exam, for example. We really work quite hard in the security team to always issue advisories and issue advice on these kind of new emerging technologies so that people know what they're looking for. Because if you don't know what you're looking for, you're never going to spot it. So we try to give kind of a good education piece on what you should be searching for when you are kind of acting as a security personnel, kind of monitoring one of these exams. I would also add to this, it's very easy to get caught up in a discussion about the digital age and everything's kind of progressing very quickly, and we're getting all of these new technologies that are coming out and they're quite scary and they have big implications for exam integrity. But also we have seen a bit of a trend recently in threat actors returning to really simple methods of cheating. So one case that we had fairly recently, we saw somebody using an old school projector to project their answers onto their computer screen. It was nothing technical that we could pick up on the device. It wasn't written notes that we could see being waved around, but it was a hidden projector that was projecting text behind them. So people are actually going back to kind of more traditional methods to be able to find inventive ways to cheat. And we've also seen people using sort of handheld printers in toilets during exams so they can get kind of the answers through onto their mobile telephone devices. They then print their answers in a toilet cubicle and then they sneak them back into the exam with them. So these sorts of things aren't particularly, I would say, tech savvy. They're not big exploits that are happening on devices, but they are kind of just new ways that threat actors will seek to kind of abuse the system, I guess. As soon, like Heidi said, as soon as we identify something, we put a measure in place to stop it, something else will pop up. And it doesn't always have to be sophisticated for a threat actor to try and sell it to someone. Doesn't mean it will work, but I think the thing we have to remember is that threat actors are out there trying to make money. And if they can sell something, or if they can dress something up to look like it's going to work to a candidate who is essentially vulnerable, going through a really stressful time with their exams, who might not be able to afford to take exams, seeking, to move through to higher education. These people are vulnerable in a sense. If a threat actor can exploit that to make money, they're going to. So it really is kind of on us as a community to kind of keep an eye out on those emerging threats, emerging trends, and be able to do something to stop them.
Thank you so much. I have time for two more questions. All right, so the one we're going to ask here is our registry regularly receives requests for educational verification from various agencies. Did you say that there's a site or platform where we can verify that these agencies are legitimate?
So in terms of our Cambridge qualifications, we have results verification services or test result verification services, which act as that single source of truth and the platform for verifying results for those qualifications. I think this question is a bit more about like a list of verified agencies. That wouldn't be something that Cambridge holds or maintains. But in terms of best practice in Jamaica and the credentialing evaluation space, I think that potentially if that's a gap, it would be worth filling and having that kind of single like collaborative space to list out those verified agencies. Like I say, I don't think that's something that we would be able to be responsible for putting together, but if it's not in place, it certainly sounds like it would be helpful to have.
I understand. Thank you. And finally, how important is it to share information across institutions about individuals who commit certification fraud?
I think this is, again, quite a nuanced question, as they all are, and we could probably talk about these for ages. It's important, I think, arguably more important to share information about the sellers of those services. So if you are able to kind of investigate where that candidate has been able to fraudulently obtain a certification, and you are able to kind of interview that particular candidate, get them to work with you, give you as much information as possible about the person they use as a service that they bought that from, you can often find out quite a lot about the threat actor. So you can find out kind of the social media sites that they're operating on, or the mobile telephone numbers that they have associated to them, their banking details, for example. If you can work closely with somebody who's used that service, who ultimately is a victim of that service, of an exploitation by a threat actor, you can gain that information, and then you can share information on the threat actor with other institutions, with local police, because ultimately this is a case of fraud and exploitation. So often gathering as much information on the sellers of these services can be more profitable than kind of sharing information about the candidates themselves. With that being said, as Heidi said as well, I think a central kind of way of being able to communicate these issues, both about the sellers and the candidates using them, probably would be a useful thing to be able to communicate, so that when issues are flagged by one institution, it can be checked by another, for example, especially with things like university admissions.
All right, I think that is it. Thank you guys both for presenting, truly informative, and we do look forward to hearing more from you again and more about the topic and the interesting world of credential assessment as well. It seems one could join an episode of CSI Miami to get, to learn more about these fraudulent activities. That being said, again, thank you for your presentation. We're going to take a short break now, and in return for our awards presentation. All right, good afternoon again, everyone. We are back, and we will be having a special item by the Excelsior Community College. Please make them welcome. Amazing, amazing, wonderful job from the team there at Excelsior Community, or from rather Excelsior Community College. A wonderful presentation. And now we will have the presentation of awards being displayed, and we'll see which institutions have received such awards.
Quality Assurance Week 2026 Awards Ceremony. The University Council of Jamaica is pleased to present the institutions whose programs were accredited or reaccredited, recognized, approved, or received institutional accreditation in the 2024 to 2025 and 2025 to 2026 financial years. The awardees will appear by year in alphabetical order and category.
For 2024 to 2025 program accreditation, the following institutions had their programs accredited or re-accredited. National Police College of Jamaica, Associate of Science in Criminal Justice, Associate of Science in Law Enforcement Instructor Development, Sigma College of Nursing and Applied Sciences, Associate Degree in Health Sciences.
Recognition of awarding body. The following institution obtained recognition as an awarding body for its quality assurance system to support the institutional accreditation process being undertaken by community colleges. The Council of Community Colleges of Jamaica.
Candidacy for institutional accreditation. The following institution obtained candidacy status for institutional accreditation: Management Institute for National Development.
Institutional accreditation. The following institution obtained institutional accreditation: Monique College.
For 2025-2026 program accreditation, the following institutions had their programs accredited or re-accredited: Bethlehem Moravian College, Associate of Science in Business Administration, Bachelor of Science in Business Administration, Associate of Science in Hospitality and Tourism Management, Bachelor of Science in Hospitality and Tourism Management.
Brownstown Community College, Associate of Applied Science in Architectural and Construction Technology, Associate of Science in Management Information Systems, Associate of Science degree in Business Administration, Associate of Science in Culinary Arts, Associate of Science in Hospitality and Tourism Management, Occupational Associate degree in Restaurant Operations Management.
Jamaica Theological Seminary, Bachelor of Social Work, Master of Social Work, Bachelor of Arts in Applied Behavior Analysis.
Montego Bay Community College, Associate of Science in Hospitality and Tourism Management, Bachelor of Science in Hospitality and Tourism Management, Associate of Science in Business Administration, Bachelor of Science in Business Administration, Applied Associate of Science in Architectural and Construction Technology, Associate of Science in Criminal Justice, Associate of Science in Social Work, Associate of Science in Psychology, Bachelor of Science in Social Work.
Regent College of the Caribbean, Bachelor of Arts in Theology, Diploma in Theology, Associate Degree in Business Studies.
The College of Insurance and Professional Studies, Certified Insurance Technician course,
Vocational Training Development Institute, Postgraduate Diploma in Education and Training.
Recognition. The following institution had their programs recognized: Delaware State University, Doctor of Education in Educational Leadership, Master of Education in Educational Leadership.
UCJ approved degree. The following institution had their program approved: Vocational Training Development Institute, Bachelor of Science in Career Development.
Congratulations! to these institutions as they continue the developmental path of ensuring quality in higher education.
Thank you so much for the sharing of that presentation. Again, please give our institutions a warm clap emoji of applause, congratulating them on their various statuses that have been achieved. Again, thank you so much for being a part of this morning's proceeding. And I will now hand over to Dr. Lisa Henlin, our Acting Director of Accreditation, for the vote of thanks. Thank you again for being here. And we do look forward to seeing some of you and your students on Thursday at our youth forum at the University of the Commonwealth Caribbean. Thank you. Dr. Henlin?
Thank you, Mr. Murray. Good afternoon, moderator, Dr. Vivian Quarry, distinguished guests, presenters, participants, colleagues, all. As we bring the 2026 Annual Quality Assurance Forum to a close, it is my distinct honor to propose a vote of thanks to all the individuals who made today a resounding success. First, our sincere gratitude to Dr. Winston Thompson of the Jamaica Theological Seminary for grounding our proceedings in prayer and setting a reflective and purposeful tone for the day. We were also privileged to receive a warm welcome and insightful opening remarks from our chairman, Mrs. Andrea White Walters. And this was followed by a powerful and challenging opening remarks by exhortation by Dr. Tamika Benjamin, who challenged and encouraged us to keep pace with the evolving landscape of global education. A most sincere thank you to our keynote presenter, Professor Tristan McCowan, for a truly enlightening and timely presentation that challenged all of us to do more with the available resources, especially with regard to climate change and sustainability education. We really do appreciate your input this morning, Professor McCowan. We also extend our thanks to assessment specialists Heidi Green and Megan Rees for the very thoughtful technical insights into integrity and assessment quality. We've received salient reminders about the landscape within which we operate. And I offer a reminder to all of us gathered here that the UCJ offers credential assessment services for persons with local and foreign qualifications from high school to university level from countries around the world in order to determine whether such qualifications satisfy the requirements for further study and or employment opportunities. We must acknowledge the very soul-stirring musical offering from the Excelsior Community College's Wings of Sound Chorale. Your rendition of I Can See Clearly Now was the perfect anthem for our Quality Assurance Forum. I was certainly inspired, and I know that we all were inspired and encouraged to assess what is before us, to clearly recognize the obstacles in our way as a critical first step to moving past those hurdles and anticipating a clear and positive path. From Excelsior Community College, we are encouraged to look for the blue skies ahead. And of course, to our council member, our very special moderator for today, Dr. Vivian Quarry, for really moderating today's proceedings. Thank you so much for your stewardship of today's agenda. We do thank you for making yourself available for this assignment. To you, our participants, the attendees here today, each year we do this in anticipation of your support, and you have always risen to the occasion. Thank you, not only for your presence, but also for your engagement during today's sessions. Madam Moderator, colleagues, distinguished guests, participants, this event would not have been possible without the tireless work of the team here at the University Council of Jamaica. To every single staff member of the UCJ, and I say that includes you and you and you, working diligently behind the scenes, answering the phones, managing the technology, the logistics, and supporting our administration in varied ways. Please know that your contribution is seen and deeply valued. Whether you are on the front lines or working quietly in the background, today's success belongs to you. Specifically, we want to recognize all the members of the 2026 Quality Assurance Planning Committee, and we need to name Mr. Najee Murray, our Director of Public Relations and Communications, who chaired the committee and interacted and engaged in so many ways. And of course, our team lead, Dr. Angela Penny, the Director of Quality Planning and Evaluation here at the UCJ. As mentioned, QA Week continues with a face-to-face student forum, youth forum, on March 12, and we have on Friday a virtual quality clinic where newly registered institutions will engage with the accreditation unit. As we continue to push forward, post-Melissa, the University Council of Jamaica reaffirms its commitment to working closely with all our institutions to ensure continuity and stability across the higher education sector. Though the challenges continue to be significant, we remain steadfast in our mandate of assuring quality in higher education. And of course, we heard that whilst the crises may test our systems, an opportunity has also been provided for us to be more resilient. Thank you for your partnership and for contributing to the success of our 2026 Annual Quality Assurance in Higher Education Week Forum. Thank you all. Thank you, and God bless.